I feel like we should start this podcast with the Supremes' baby love.
Why?
Sophia Wilson.
What does that have to do with the Supremes or baby love?
She's pregnant.
Right. Got it. Okay. Leave all of this in.
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals Orlando edition. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. It's not just Orlando edition. It's welcome to Season Preview Week. That's right,
Hello.
folks. It is the first episode of XOG's NWSL Season Preview Week, which is really like a season preview 8 days if you want to count the weekends. We are going to be bringing you extended full-length previews of all 14 NWSL teams between now and opening day on Friday, March 14th. We've got incredible guests for every single episode who bring their knowledge, bring their insight, they bring their wit. Yes, I said wit with an H in there.
Obnoxious, yeah.
and just you are going to learn so much about these teams if you don't know everything already because of how deeply invested in these teams these guests are. So we are super, super excited to be bringing you this series. It was such a success for us last year. It helped us launch our partnership with American Soccer Analysis. And this year, with more listeners and more fans, it gives us a chance to just make the tent even bigger. So we are very, very excited to be launching Season Preview Week today.
I like that we thought, you know what, wasn't a ton of work, releasing 7 huge episodes previewing teams. So we decided to release 14 huge episodes.
Yeah, but they're the same as last year, just we cut them up. It's all fine.
And we have a lot more guests this year.
Yeah.
But what's exciting to start about with Orlando is they are your reigning champions. So we are dropping this in advance of the Challenge Cup, where they will face runners-up Washington Spirit, who we will be dropping a podcast for very shortly as well.
Indeed. But before we do that, we'll just get to some bits and bobs, some news and notes. Nothing much to report other than, Grace Chanda and Rafaele were removed from the season-ending injury list with Orlando, so that's going to be relevant for today. Savannah King signed an extension with Angel City that keeps her under contract through 2028. That seems to be a big vote of confidence from Mark Parsons and the gang over there. Caitlin Torpy is going to be a fullback for the Thorns, which helps with their defensive depth issues, coming over from San Diego for a $10,000 intra-league transfer fund. Let me see what else. Some short-term contracts. I think I've seen 3 college players on non-roster invites out of Utah were signed. Morgan Messner is going to be the third keeper with the Thorns, signed a 1-year deal. And Riley Tiernan, college player, signed a 2-year plus a club option contract with Angel City. I'm trying to hunt anything else. Any other?
Sophia Wilson is out for the Portland Thorns because she's having a baby. So congratulations to Sophia Wilson and
commiserations to the Portland Thorns attack.
Yeah, good luck to the Portland Thorns. This
news is so monumental, we realized we had to re-record our Thorns season preview, which you will be hearing next week.
Yeah.
Because it changed. I think each of us dropped our predicted final table finish by like 5 or 6 places.
Yeah, that's right.
So, in addition to the Morgan Weaver, Nicole Payne, Marie Mueller injury issues, this is the nail in the coffin to Portland's playoff hopes.
Wilson Weaver, Soldier Spy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a troubling situation in Portland. But you know where it's not troubling? Central Florida.
Mm.
With us today, we have Bridie O'Toole from Busy Watching Women's Soccer, and it's a great conversation.
Yes.
So.
Bridie is, if you haven't already, the best YouTuber about women's soccer tactics. Be sure to follow her channel on YouTube. We'll link to it in the show notes. If you like listening to this show, watching Bridie's videos is essentially like this show come to visual life. It's moving from radio to TV. Her work is great, and we were really lucky to have her on to break down what we think about the 2025 Orlando Pride. So without further ado, listen to Bridie O'Toole. I recall when Eric and I recorded our season preview for the Orlando Pride a year ago, and I don't think either of us had it in our deck of cards that we were going to be flashing forward 12 months and try to reflect on a team that just did the double, winning the Shield and the NWSL Championship at a counter. But here we are to join us on our season preview for the Orlando Pride. Couldn't really ask for anybody better. She is the host of Busy Watching Women's Soccer on YouTube, which is probably the best piece of YouTube content that listeners of this show should be taking in. It's Bridie O'Toole. Bridie, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was quite the season preview last year, so excited to help with the follow-up.
Ouch.
Indeed. We talked to Haley Carter before the NWSL Championship, and she really sold us the idea of the Orlando Pride being a project that is built around collective identity, built around team over superstars, even though they've got superstars, on making sure that every position is stocked with depth and every player is wildly happy to come to work every single day because of the structures that have been put in place. With hindsight being 2020, kind of feels like she was right. But from your POV, going from preseason last year to final whistleblowing in Kansas City just before Thanksgiving, what was your impression of what the Pride accomplished last year?
Just a phenomenal accomplishment, but I think what stood out to me most was like this was a single vision being accomplished. I think they had a very clear picture of what they wanted to build, very clear methodology for getting there. And what you say about that interview just lines up with what you see on film, right? There's joy in the play. It's team play. It's connected. But then once in a blue moon, you have this fantastic play from a superstar, and you kind of see how everything gets strung together.
One of the things that immediately stood out to me when we talked to Haley Carter was the idea that essentially every piece of roster construction was built to be interchangeable until they got to the point where they needed to go get that one final piece, that piece being Barbara Banda. What do you think was the most crucial element in ultimately their NWSL championship run?
To me, I don't think it's really the depth. I think the depth is really helpful. I think kind of late in the season, we saw them want to get some more minutes for some of their depth players and maybe struggle with that a little bit. So I think, Route 1, Plan A, they just had that down so well. And to me, that was, we want to play transitional football. We don't want to play in our own area. And we want the ball at our foot and we want to run with it. They were very, very consistent about those things.
With the concept of interchangeability, though, it's so fascinating to think at the start of 2024, did not have Haley McCutcheon being a central midfielder on my bingo card, moving her over from fullback. Carrie Abello being pushed further and further back on the left side to when she's now suddenly playing in defense. Kylie Strom moving from fullback to center back. Summer Yates being a 10 or a wing. There were so many what ultimately became key components of the squad who were playing either positions they were largely unfamiliar with or at least somewhat or recently unfamiliar with. So what is it about A, the players themselves, and B, what head coach Seb Hines wants to do tactically that allows for such positional flexibility in a squad like this?
I think it's almost like some of the things we saw players moving to, I think of Abello coming up the pitch. She was doing the same thing, regardless of if she was at left back or if you want to call it more left mid. It was the same execution. And so I think when you talk about interoperability, it's more so looking at what's the skill set you have and where can we use that, and less so this is exactly what we want out of a left back. Kind of player before position almost.
For people like McCutcheon and Strom, who are comfortable playing out wide and found themselves more in the center of the pitch last year, and Carter has referenced this too, the idea of like, we look at skills, and then we figure out the role. And even if it's not necessarily the one that you've been told you are best suited for. But moving a certain place on the wing is a different question than telling a fullback, now you're going to be a 6'8", or telling a fullback, actually, we're pulling you inside and having you play in central defense. What is it about McCutcheon and Strom, or what Hines was looking for them, that allowed them to be successful doing those things?
If I had to guess, it would probably be comfort on the ball. And I think the number one thing that changes when you move from an outside position to the inside, it gets really scary and terrifying very quick because there's so much around you that you cannot see. So I think for both of them, they're very comfortable on the ball. They're very comfortable progressing the ball up the pitch. And I guess that would just be my guess is, we want feet on the ball. We want players that are comfortable doing that wherever.
We also need to tell our listeners, because Bridie is who she is, this is probably going to be the wonkiest season preview we have among all 14 teams. And we are very excited about that. So we are really going to get into the weeds here.
Here's a question I have for you, because I think this is something that every team that faced the Orlando Pride didn't actually have a good answer for, and every team going into this season does need to solve to stop the second run. What are the actual weaknesses of this iteration of the Orlando Pride as you see them?
Gosh, I really tried to crack into that last year, and it was tough. I will say I didn't see it until everybody saw it, but the depth, I just don't think the depth players had enough minutes. And this team was benefiting in the sense that, they had some of the best stability amongst their roster, I think, amongst NWSL teams, but that kind of came to bite them in those matches, I think, against Portland and Gotham a little bit. So I imagine something they'll want to rectify a little bit earlier this year is getting everybody as comfortable. But in terms of their tactical model, it's a tough one. They want to win the ball back and counter high up the pitch. So I think if you can be patient, you can work the ball lower down and play possession in their area. That's what's going to be a little bit tougher for them. But they don't really have any glaring holes to me.
It's so interesting that you mention a team maybe being able to play possession if you can push those midfield and defensive lines a little bit deeper into their own half, because what I saw is a team that set up in a 4-4-2 mid-block and you just couldn't find holes. Even if they weren't necessarily jumping a pressing trigger in the attacking half, if you wanted to try and play in their space, there really wasn't any room to move because they were so positionally disciplined. So to use that to jump into what the roster is going to look like in 2025, this is, as it so often is with championship winners, basically the same team. They're more or less running it back. A couple of interesting additions. Oyan Hernandez coming over from Real Madrid. Grace Chanda hopefully will be healthy and essentially will act as a new signing. And Zara Chavoshi, college signing out of Wake Forest. Prisa Chalufia coming over from Juarez in Mexico. But otherwise, all the key pieces from last year are here. Is that form of continuity, you think, going to benefit this group, or is there maybe a risk of it getting a little bit stale? Or rather, now that there is a full season of tape out on how this group operates, will their opposition be able to handle their shit a little bit better?
Yeah. I see where I've gone with this is I feel like they have two opportunities. I think you can either try and double down on what you did last season, improve it, make it better, or you can try and offer a bit more tactical flexibility so that what you're showing on film is maybe not exactly the same thing every week. And I just think with their system, how they're built, they control two phases of the game, which is the attacking to defending transition and the defending to attacking transition. They're just going to double down on owning those areas to me. So I think when you start looking at personnel, it's more depth to continue what they've already been doing.
I think the scariest element of what this team has coming into this year for opposition is the addition of Grace Chanda as just a sort of roving, flexible attacker underneath Barbara Bando, with whom she already has a lot of reps. The one place that I saw weakness in Orlando last year was occasionally becoming Marta reliant, and that being just an older player who couldn't do all the running necessary inside a very aggressive Orlando system. They don't have that problem this year, and they tried to rectify it last year, and Chanda got injured away with Zambia before she could really sort of get involved with this team. Given that, do you think this Orlando team is poised to actually be more dangerous offensively than they were last year?
I think so a little bit. And part of it for me is, the Zambian connection. When they play together, if we watch national team games, the chemistry is so good, and it's the same style of play. It's the same transitional dominant play. And so part of what's worked so well for Orlando is the chemistry having all the Brazilian players. Now you get to double down with, two different countries and bring these different groups together. I just don't see how they don't continue to build on what they've already been doing and make it better.
One key loss is Adriana moving to Saudi Arabia, which opens up a spot on the wing. It seems like it's plug and play with Summer Yates and some combination of Julie Doyle or Ali Watt on either of those flanks. Where do you see Hines optimizing his wide attacking play among those three players? Who seems to be the best fits for each position?
I like Watt a lot. I think she really came through and delivered at the end of the season. I think also she's kind of Banda-esque in a way, and I think they really just want speed options up there. I think they want people that can, move the ball long distances if they need to, whether that's on the ground, whether it's, big balls into the box. I just think Watt offers the most continuity from what they had last season.
Should Barbara Banda go down for some period of the season, what do you think their solve is?
Ooh, Priska Chilufya actually looked, a lot of elements of her game look very similar to me. And in my mind, I think I think the goal is for her to probably be a backup for Banda. I don't think her, first touch is maybe quite as developed, and Banda has a tendency to kind of dribble the ball into the net if she can. I think Priska looks like she's happier to just sort of play one time and move things a little faster. But I think, yes, they would probably rest Banda a little bit more, make sure that they have her available for as much as they want, and they've got somebody they can send out there that will look probably about 80% similar.
We've talked on the show before about who gets found out first, Temwa Chewinga, Barbara Banda, and Banda shockingly had a weird rough patch in the back end of the regular season. She cleaned it up for the playoffs, but there were a few games there in the stretch run where it seemed like she might have switched off a bit. What is it about Banda's game that is so frustratingly unpredictable for opposing defenses? And similar to my question about the team as a whole, like, what do you think center backs and other defenders have figured out about Banda that they might be able to use to their advantage this year?
I think probably and you could maybe see it a little bit with McKeown at the final, is I think folks have realized that Banda has a really, really good read of the ball on the ground. And a lot of the time she will try to set herself up with the touch instead of sort of playing immediately off the ball that comes in. She's really, really good at manipulating the ball, reading spin. But I think if you're really patient, that also gives you an opportunity as a player to read that and try and compete with her read. I think McKeown did a really good job of that. She sort of sticks on her, but she's patient, waits for the right moments to tackle. So I think if you can resist the temptation to panic, foul, there's an opportunity to play on her. But most of what we saw last season was just, let's slow her down.
It sort of feels like the blunt force approach of hack a Banda or hack a Temwa was what most teams ended up resorting to. Like, sad as it may be, athletically, I think, is there a center back in the league beyond McKeown that you feel like matches up even well against a Banda?
Well, I want to say Gurma, but
she's gone.
Not anymore.
I don't know. I think what you're looking for is you're looking for somebody that's, comfortable with pace and they're comfortable one-on-one. I think McKeown is probably the best bet there right now.
As far as complementary, it's so strange to consider them complementary players because they aren't. They are all actually productive players on a very, very good team. Is there a member of sort of the core of Orlando that you really feel like could break out this season and step up and make this team like yet more dangerous?
Oof, that's a good one. I like Dyke a lot. I think she understands her position well. I think one thing Orlando have done an exceptional job at is, developing talent, giving them the minutes slowly, building up to that. And I think she looked better and better as the season went on. She's going to be in a competitive spot right now, fighting for her place. But I think we could potentially see a little bit more out of her.
Let's go through every single positional group here because I in our rundown, I made a vain attempt at a formation in N11, but I also put a column of alternate players for a bunch of different positions. And you look at it and you're like, that could be a starting 11 too. So we talked about the attack. Let's talk about the midfield for a second. Assuming they can come back to full health, you have Angelina, Luana Bertolucci, Morgan Gautrat, and Haley McCutcheon if she stays in central midfield. 4 players who could start basically anywhere in the league for 2 spots. What is the best way to get the most out of all four of those players? How do you rotate them? How do you set them up tactically against opponents? Who ultimately are the two that you're going to want to start in the championship come November?
Gosh, it's a tough one. I think, can you set them all up for success equally? I think you got to be honest. I mean, the answer is probably no. I think you're going to have to pick some winners at some point, and you have to focus on how can I get the others the minutes so that when they need it, they're ready and they have the chemistry and they're ready for the pace of play. But I think ultimately you have to pick some winners, which is kind of what happened last season. I think with Luana coming back, it's going to be really difficult to not give her those minutes because her style works very well with this squad. And Angelina as well is another one for me where I think, when you kind of pull back from the sort of first watch and you look at the details behind a lot of the passes, she's really involved in a lot of the key moments. And those are two players for me that I think it's going to be harder to get off the pitch than it is to keep them on.
What's incredible, I mean, obviously they have the advantage of knowing each other from their time in Brazil, but it is also kind of insane to, I think maybe ultimately I do agree with you, when Hayley McCutcheon had probably the season of her life last year and in a championship winning team. That must be a very difficult decision for a head coach to say, you contributed so much to our success, I might need you off the bench and as a role player. Like, how do you manage that as Seb Hines? Like, what are the hard conversations that you have to have with somebody like Hayley McCutcheon, theoretically, if that situation were to arise?
Yeah, I think the best coaches are really clear on expectations. So this is why I'm going in this direction. This is what I need from you in order to change the direction. And that second conversation may not even be a conversation. It may not be hey, I need you to fix this. It may be, I just need you to be patient with me. And then I think the third thing is figuring out, well, what are you here to do? Are you elevating our training environment, or are you giving us a different tactical look so that when we're going up against certain opponents, we're going to switch things up and we're going to kind of maintain our edge that way?
I think the one actual potential hiccup in terms of roster construction for this Orlando team is that center of the park, and it mostly just has to do with age. And just the aging that is going on, plus the sort of brutal summer conditions of playing in Orlando. You've got Luana, age 32 season, Morgan Gautrat, age 32 season, Hayley McCutcheon, 29, so typically just at the end of peak for a central midfielder. And then Angelina is kind of the only one who's in her peak era. So it feels like rotation's going to be essential, and that there probably are enough minutes to go around. My question for a player who we all think is, I assume, we all think is a very productive player is, where are the minutes for Carson Pickett coming? And how do they get Carson Pickett on the pitch?
So, gosh, this is a really tough one for me because I kind of feel like they have to stick with Abello. And the reason I feel so strongly about that, it's those transitional moments is, when she does win the ball, she's moving with it immediately, and it helps them speed up the flow of their play. To me, it's kind of like do you want to do this by land or do you want to do this by air? Because with Carson Pickett, you're getting the most beautiful floated balls that are so inviting for a team that's been incredibly good on set pieces and in the air. So maybe it is just a case of one starts one match when we're going with the ground route, one starts one match when we're going in the air. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see them do something a little bit more creative with Carson Pickett to get her on the field with Abello at the same time.
I mean, I think they featured Pickett at left wing in one or two games at the end of last year, which, oof, bite your hand off for a piece of that. That'd be something. Right back was a place where there was a lot of player rotation. I think they had 3 or 4 different players who started at least 3 games at that slot. Obviously, Corey Dyke ended up being the starting right back down the stretch, but with Oyan Hernandez coming in, you would assume that she goes right into the 11, given that she's an international transfer with a pretty high profile. You mentioned how much you like Dyke, which is maybe a pin you will find at an ACT UP rally in 1986, but is Oyan the right choice, or does Dyke maybe win that job outright, given what she showed Hines and Carter at the end of last year?
So Oyhane, is that how I pronounce it?
Oh, I thought it was Oyan. It could be Oyan. I might be.
I honestly have no idea. So I'm just going to say Hernandez.
Okay.
Gosh, I was trying to watch some film, and it's a struggle sometimes trying to find film from some of these players that aren't getting maybe the minutes they all deserve on these really competitive European sides. But I mean, she looks like an Orlando player. She's small, she's dribbly, she's fast. Like she's going to fit into their system well. I think we saw a little bit of this last year. It's a lot adapting to a new league. It's a lot adapting to a new country. Can you come in day one and do that? Maybe the plan is to work her up into that role, but I just don't see it day one for some reason. I'm not sure why, because the film would kind of go against me on that one.
I mean, my gut certainly feels like you would just start your starting 11 from the championship to open the season if everybody's healthy. Like, I'm not even sure if that is the right choice, but it just sort of feels like Hines wants to do right by the people who got him there.
Yeah.
Is my gut right, you think?
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards as well. I mean, maybe we're all going to be surprised, but you had a group of players that just worked their butts off last year. They accomplished everything they set out to accomplish. Why change stuff before you know what you need to?
Yeah, and this league is notorious for tearing up the playbook and tossing it in the trash after 6 or 7 games. So whatever happens on March 15th might not be what the case in come October. Raffaele still listed on the SCI list, but was somebody who you have to assume Carter and Hines were hoping she would be pretty central to their plans when they brought her over from Arsenal. And obviously injury has blocked that, and the success of Kylie Strom and Emily Sams as a center back partnership last year makes me think that they will emphasize that continuity over bringing Raffaele back in. But at the same time, every time Raffaele was healthy, they tried to get her minutes. And so what's the solve there? Do you plop Raffaele in and drop Strom, or do you say, let's wait and just keep doing what we're doing here?
Yeah, it's another tough, good decision to have. I think my gut is wait there, and I'm with you. You don't bring this player in unless you had the intention of playing them, but Strom just had such a good season, and I think this is where a lot of the difficulty is coming from. Is last season, so many players, by all accounts, seem to have their best season. So do you just go with the expectation that they're going to be able to follow it up and you just unlocked that next level in them? Or are you just kind of on edge waiting to see how it plays out? I think it's going to be a very masterful blend of active management and sort of passively waiting for things to play themselves out.
I think it would have to be, because whether it's Andrew Friedman at the Dodgers or Bill Belichick at the New England Patriots, anyone, or Alex Ferguson with Man United Men, like any coach that has sustained success, Emma Hayes with Chelsea, they don't sit still. And I think my gut tells me that even though Hines might want to truly run it back, they would be wise to, as you say, find a masterful mix of old and new just to keep everybody on their toes and keep them fresh.
And I think that's one of the positions to do it, probably. If you've been really successful not letting in a lot of goals, you have to commit to that. It's an area to continue it.
Is there any glimmer of time available for Ali Lemos, one of the rare sort of like young but blooded players on this team?
Yeah, I think so. I think those sub minutes are going to be there. I think that's something the team have done a good job at, is sort of, managing the developmental minutes. Is there a long-term starting role? I'm not sure I quite see that in the 2025 season.
Is Anna Morehouse as good as she has seemed over the last couple of years? Can she keep this going? A player who was just in the weeds or lost at sea, and now all of a sudden she's getting England call-ups. It's kind of extraordinary.
It is. I'm going to say yes, because I don't want to say like she completely sandbagged the season, but I feel like we saw her do a couple things towards the end of the season. I'm thinking about, the final against the Spirit. She was not launching balls out of the box the whole rest of the season. She wasn't really playing with her feet much. And then all of a sudden that one game she does it, and she does it pretty well. So I think there's probably more to her game than we've seen on film. Goalies, of course, always take a little bit longer to develop. You've got the confidence of last season behind you. I think she could have a repeat.
I think it's time to ask the question I ask all of our guests, but I think this one might have a short answer here. Put yourself in Seb Hines' shoes. What's keeping you up late at night or giving you nightmares as you enter this season, if you're him?
I think it's that thing we talked about general manager touching on is you want everybody to enjoy playing there. You want everybody to be happy. You want to continue the joy that you had last season. I think really you were subs in a great situation where it's wonderful problems to have, but how do you keep positive attitude amongst all the players as you're making these difficult decisions? I don't really think it's going to be on-field performance. I think it's, all off-field stuff. It's probably going to be the most difficult.
Well, if Haley Carter is to be believed, these are some of the best paid players in the NWSL, so it might not be all that hard to keep them happy. Moment of truth here. Where are they finishing in the table come November?
I keep going back and forth on this because I kind of felt like last season, and I know this is a huge oversimplification, but I felt like last season we're maybe going to see this play out where transitional football works up until a point, and then when things get a little bit more critical, the possession style takes over. And I think we're realizing, or I'm realizing now, there's just so many different types of football that these teams are playing so well and so effectively that I don't think it's as easy as A versus B. I think we're getting kind of like intelligent variations of each. So I have to think someone's going to figure it out, but I think it's going to be late in the season. I don't know. I could see them going two or three.
Got to pin you down. 2 or 3. Which one?
Well, let's say 3. I'm not happy about it, but I don't know why it feels like a better number.
Who are your 2 above?
I like Spirit a lot. I think they've been doing a really good roster build there, and it's
unanimous number 1
yeah,
for both us and Eric. Yeah.
The other one, I'm waiting to see how it plays out, but I just feel like Seattle could have something. I think they've been such a historically good team. I think they're just trying to go back to what they've been doing, and maybe it won't work for them. Maybe all the tactical models have moved on, but I think they might have something there.
Wow, that was not what I thought you were going to say.
Boy, that's left field because that's between Evan and I, unanimous number 11.
Well, the next time you're in LA or we're in San Diego after the season ends and we know where Seattle finishes, whoever was more wrong buys the other the drinks.
Okay, I hope it's me.
It's gonna be second for me with Orlando. I think they are stacked. I think they are, by all available evidence, one of the best run organizations in the league. And I don't see them, even with losing Adriana, I don't really see them getting worse. I see at worst they're probably holding serve. But weirdly enough, all the problems that we have listed today are champagne problems, because who doesn't want 3 or 4 great players at every single position? But they are kind of problems, and it puts a manager's locker room psychology to the test to make sure that everybody is staying happy, as you alluded to, even if they are riding the bench or losing minutes as the season goes on. So I think it's going to be a very close race between Washington and Orlando, but I think Orlando ends up getting second.
It actually feels like an insult, given what they did last year, to even rank them number 2, considering I think they actually just got better. It's just that Washington, I think, maybe got marginally yet better than Orlando. When you look at the completeness of this Orlando roster and you consider even the teams who I think are kind of mid-table-y, it just feels like night and day, the distance between the teams at the top of this league and the teams still trying to figure it out. So for me, Orlando it's kind of 1 and 1A, and I think they're my 1A. So 2, but 1A. Yeah.
I like that. That's a much more diplomatic, but also probably realistic way of looking at it.
No, it's basically like, I mean, like, how good was Orlando last year? Like, so stunning, and it like week by week, you sort of just felt like it was gonna fall apart at some point, and they didn't lose until what, a road game in Portland where they ran out their bench. Yeah, that was a team that legitimately could have put together the perfect season.
I'm gutted they didn't.
Yeah, elected not to.
Oh, yeah.
If they, as it always is, if they finish third and crash out in the semifinals, I think that's realistic. If
that's knockout soccer. Like
if they run the table and do the double again, that wouldn't shock me either.
Yeah,
they are unquestionably in this top tier of the league. The season is going to start very, very soon. You'll be listening to this when the Challenge Cup will be contested between Washington and Orlando, which will be something to look forward to. Anybody want to handicap that game?
Yeah, I'm going to say Orlando. I don't know why, but I just feel like Spirit will just use it as a chance to experiment and mess around and get data.
Last year's marquee matchup in this league, in terms of just like raw intensity, was Orlando, Kansas City. This year, Washington, Orlando feels like it has the potential to be just like high stakes games every time. I'm with Bridie. I think that there's very little chance either of these teams run out something that isn't a little bit experimental, because the stakes aren't that high, and I'd rather figure out things in a competitive fixture rather than like concern myself with winning it.
It's the Community Shield. You know,
it is the Community
that's
Shield.
the vibe, man. So even to the point where they are booking it a week out from the regular season, which they've never done before.
To be contrarian, I'll take Washington in this one. Maybe 1-0.
I like Washington 3-2. I want chaos. All gas, no brakes, baby. Bridie O'Toole you can find on social media at Bridie O, and be sure to follow, subscribe to, and watch every episode of Busy Watching Women's Soccer. It is some of the best tactical content you can find on the women's game. Bridie O'Toole, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. That was Bridie O'Toole, who I think had one of the shrewdest breakdowns you'll hear about the Orlando Pride. So, Evan, just to close out the episode, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the 90th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 10th percentile seasons look like for the Orlando Pride?
Well, given the fact that I had their 50th percentile for me is second place, I would say they are.
Me too.
90th is Shield winners. And 10th percentile without Adriana, with an aging Marta, we don't know how she's going to be used, and maybe all of their depth maybe regressing a little bit relative to what they did last season. Still think they're a playoff team, but maybe 6th.
Yeah, I think their 90th percentile is they run it back and they do the double again.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I think maybe their 75th percentile is they do that. Their 50th is agreed. I have them in second. And for me, the 10th percentile for the Orlando Pride, yeah, is still a playoff team. Probably not a home playoff team, but a playoff team. They're just, organizationally, is there a significantly better run team in the league? I don't think so.
Washington or Kansas City are the only two you could really make an argument for. And based on this offseason, I think it's really just Orlando and Washington.
They're just so impressive, and they deserve the benefit of the doubt to figure it out if something goes truly awry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my basement for them is 6th. 5th. It's 5th.
Great. Well, our baseline is that you should join our Patreon. For only $6 a month or $60 a year, it gets you 4 bonus episodes every single month, including access to our Discord server and our semi-regular live streams. We should all... What is wrong with me? You should follow us on social media at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. And if you think we've made an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. And be sure to rate us 5 stars, drop a review in your podcatcher of choice, and tell all of your friends about the show. We will be back tomorrow to preview the Washington Spirit with the Washington Post's Ella Brockway.
It's very fun. Bye.